Hi guys. As you guys know, I love this meeting. I love seeing everybody here. Fun meeting. So I have Mike Johnson with me. He taught me everything, so he's the best. And there's a picture of us at the Electricities conference a couple weeks ago. We went to the Biltmore and we bought Christmas sweaters because why not? And so our three key or base services, I guess, are financial projections, cost of service studies, and rate design. But there's a lot of nuance in and of that. No, we don't need to hear. No? Okay. And last year, I know we talked a lot about financial health, and I showed a little table on different rate designs and how you balance the metrics and how you can come up with a nice, smooth rate design, normally very small, minimal impacts. Ideally, you're doing like 2-3% adjustments each year. So you never get to the point where you need that like 10% rate increase because double digits is always scary. And we also talked a little bit last year about integrating technology to improve rate design. And those key services, they haven't gone away. We've been very fortunate to have a very busy year. But in and of those services, we've seen a lot of increased interest this year with commercial EV charging rates. So pretty much every rate study that we're doing, we're adding on a commercial EV charging rate. And I actually, because of the other previous presentations today, I threw some slides in about this rate in particular, because it's different than a general service rate. And a lot of times what's happening is they just throw the commercial EV charging station on the general service rate. And the load pattern doesn't actually fit the general service profile. So, and I want to walk you through why. Oh, question already, yes.
Yeah, just define me what you mean by commercial.
Yeah, so this would be a charging station that's not at a customer, at like a residential home. It would be like a level 2 or a DC fast charger. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
That's right.
The second service is a line extension policy, and I know we were talking at my table about new like large loads like data centers, cryptocurrency mining, and then we've also seen a lot of like residential development growth, and so utilities want to be sure that they have a proper line extension policy in place so that they're not footing the bill for these big improvements happening in development. So we want to make sure that growth is good for the entire system and that our existing ratepayers aren't carrying more burden than they should when it comes to growth. And then the third thing are power cost adjustment mechanisms. I know this isn't applicable to everybody depending on where you are geographically, but we've been putting in emergency PCAs because of the recent variability in power supply cost. So this is a really important financial tool to help with that financial stability with the pass-through power supply cost. So new service offerings for this year, which I'm going to also show a little bit of, is it's called a financial assessment. And it's basically a checkup where we look at all of these different financial metrics, and it gives you like a nice little plethora of statistics about the utility to just see how we're doing. And then future service offerings that we're working on right now is quantifying the value of public power to your community. So it's not a valuation study in the standpoint of like, how much is the utility worth? It's not a, we're better than the local IOU. It's just providing a metric or number to the value that having a local municipally owned utility brings. And so we're anticipating our rollout on that in 2025. We're really excited for it, but we're just not quite ready to bring it to the forefront, but it's close. So I'll probably be talking about that next year. Okay, so going back to commercial EV charging, again, those level 2 and DC fast chargers that are out in the community, at the library, at Walmart. So typically what will happen, like I explained, is that they'll just get thrown onto a general service rate. And a general service rate typically is comprised of a customer charge, a demand charge, and an energy rate. And the problem with throwing a commercial EV fast charger, or any type of commercial EV charger on this type of a rate structure is that it likely will overcharge them. So within the demand charge, you have 4 components. So with cost of service, your costs come from all different places. And we like to unbundle our rates to understand the cost drivers behind each component. And when you're looking at a demand rate, you have costs for infrastructure that's closest to the customer. The cost driver for that is the customer's peak of your distribution infrastructure that's close to the customer. Then you have 3 other components. You have sub-transmission, transmission, and power supply. And that's the contribution towards the system's peak. So how much is the customer contributing toward the system peak? And it gets a little dicey because when you're thinking about the distribution peak, that's really easy to figure out. It's like, well, what is the customer's peak? There you go. But when you're trying to figure out the customer's contribution toward the system peak, that is different because when we do a cost of service study, we categorize all of our customers into a rate class: general service, residential. So we're looking at everybody on a class basis, averaging that peak to figure out what the contribution toward the system is. And it all comes down to load factor. So how frequently is the customer operating? Typically for a general service class, the load factor on average is around 40%. But for an EV charging station right now, because they're not used as frequently, that load factor is like 5 to 15%. I don't know. 15 is very generous, but it's a very low load factor. So the probability of an EV charger hitting or contributing to that system peak is actually pretty low, which means that this rate structure, since it's designed for a 40% load factor, it's probably overcharging the EV charger. Hopefully I didn't lose you on that, because that's a little in-depth. So what we've been doing is we've been separating out the demand charge component. So if you look at the general service rate tariff column, you'll see customer charge, $40. Demand charge is $15.80, but it's comprised of those 4 components. Then you have a time of use energy rate, and you can see on the general service rate tariff, that's the same rate. So we're just charging a flat energy rate. But for the EV charger, the more accurate way to charge them is to charge them the $40 customer charge, but we're still going to charge them the distribution component of the demand charge, because remember, that's the infrastructure that's closest to the customer. That is their real actual contribution to their peak. So $2.30 for a demand charge. And then we're going to capture the other 3 components through a time-based energy rate. So we have an off-peak, an on-peak, and a critical peak rate. And you can see that that's ascending, so it gets more expensive. Critical peak is 23 cents. So that if they are contributing to the system peak, we are recovering that cost component for sub-transmission, transmission, and power supply. And you can see that when we calculate those bills and compare general service to EV charging at a 40% load factor, the bill is the same, right? Because that's the average of the class. But for a 5% load factor customer, that EV charger should only be charged $322, but would be charged $795. So that's kind of what we're looking at, what we're doing with EV charging right now in the best case scenario if you have the ability to do time of use rates. On the financial side, a financial assessment is a little checkup It's kind of a sweet little study. We look at at least 14 key indicators. And it's great because it allows individual utilities to look at where they're at and get a really quick picture of that. And then for joint action agencies, it allows them to know how healthy their members are. So here's some factors that we look at in the financial assessment. So days cash on hand. You can see for this utility that I pulled, we looked back historically 3 years, and their days cash on hand was declining. So most recently in 2023, 134 days cash on hand. Debt to equity ratio is within industry standards around 30 to 35%. And then capital reinvestment, we were doing great in 2021 and pretty good in 2022. And in 2023, we didn't invest as much. Why? Probably because our days cash on hand was decreased. So again, we look at rate of return. That's how much operating income we are getting to reinvest into our system. So in 2021 and 2022, you can see this utility was operating at losses. And then in 2023, we have a slight positive. Debt coverage ratio was low in 2021 and low in 2021 and 2022, but still meeting the standard. So 1.2 to 1.4 for debt coverage ratio. This utility had 6.2% system losses. The age of the system is 61%, which is high. And the transfer to the city was 14%, which is also super high. So then we looked at rates and charges, and you can see that the utility went a long time with no rate adjustment, which was clear in the financials leading up to 2023, where they needed to have a 5.7% increase followed by a 5% increase in 2024. We could also tell that this utility is pretty commercially heavy in their sales mix. Their 5 largest customers as a percent of total sales makes up a huge part of that pie. So all other sales were 67.3%. And then we provide a quick reference assessment. So all of the factors that we look at, we list out in a little chart. And then, especially with the joint action agencies that we've worked with on a financial assessment, we've been able to kind of line all of them up so so they can look at them, each individual member, all right next to each other.
This has been a presentation of Hometown Connections. Please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.